All right, good morning, everyone.
Come need me unlock
Good
that.
to see you. No, you're not seeing double. This is my brother. He used to wear glasses, so it would have been even better,
Yeah.
but not today. Well, this is a little bit of a special time. Often when we have missionaries come in, we'll do a whole church thing. Jared and his wife Claire are missionaries, outgoing missionaries in the next couple of months here. They have some churches in California, in the Northern California area, that are supporting them, and they're kind of on their way down to Southern California to visit some of those supporting churches. And we thought, as the missions team recommended, and us as elders thought it would be a blessing to have them kind of on their way through to come and share about their ministry. And Jared will be preaching this morning to share the word with us. But it's a privilege for me to introduce my brother, Claire. Claire will be up with the kiddos. They have 3 kids. In a little bit, you might tell you more about their family. But I want to share with you a video. Actually, this was something that I kind of thought of the other day. This brother is Marcus Denny, and he's been a missionary for 15 years in the Czech Republic. So here's something I was thinking about recently is sometimes, I don't know about you, but I hear about a missions opportunity or maybe a ministry in a place where it kind of makes you stop and think, don't they have churches there? You know, don't they have the gospel there? That sounds like a very Christian place. Why is there a need for more missionaries, more pastors, more churches, more gospel witness in that place? For instance, Jared's brother-in-law, I consider him a brother-in-law as well, is a pastor in England. And you actually find as you go around trying to help people understand the ministry in England, in London, that people kind of scratch their heads and go, did they have like the Puritans and all these guys who preach the gospel and establish churches? Don't they have the gospel? And the reality is what's happened in the last 500 years is that London is full of Muslims and all of the world's religions that do not have the gospel. And so churches and pastors and Christians need support, and churches are very small there. And so there's a huge need in those kinds of places. And I think the Czech Republic might kind of fit in that category in our minds. You think, okay, the Czech Republic doesn't, they don't have a lot of wars going on. There's not, it's not like the Congo where there's war and civil unrest at all times. But what you'll hear from Jared, I think will maybe open your eyes to see that there are places that maybe are a little obscure and maybe seem a little like there's not an urgency necessarily for the gospel there, but you'll find that is definitely the case. And so, Jared, let me click it here and see if it pops back up again.
Did I lock you out?
Oh, maybe. So, Jared, I'll have you come up and grab that. What this video is, right before I invite Jared up to share with you all, is just a message from Marcus Denny to you all, who is the pastor in the Czech Republic, to just kind of express to you the opportunity and the need that we have as believers to encourage our brother here. Let me just read from 3 John briefly before we do that. The apostle says, "Beloved, it's a faithful thing you do in all your efforts for these brothers, strangers as they are." There's a stranger to you, I recognize that. "But who testified to your love before the church. You do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God. For they've gone out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore we ought to support people like these, that we may be fellow workers for the truth." So just want to encourage you to, if nothing else, to be in earnest prayer, even as Jared shares this morning. Pray for the people in the Czech Republic. Pray that God would open their eyes to behold the wondrous things of God from the gospel. And pray for Jared and Claire as they're on the on-ramp to the mission field. So let me play this for you, and then I'll invite Jared to come right up.
Okay.
Well, grace to all of you. My name is Marcus Denny, and I'm a missionary in the Czech Republic, where I've been serving for the last 15 years. And I was sent out by the same church that trained up Corey and Jared as well. And it's been a real joy to be over there. I ended up over there to partner with a missionary that was originally sent up by Grace Community Church. And I got over there, and he had been laboring for 13 years. There was a church of about 12 people, that's counting his family of 6. And we got over there in April of 2009, and they left in July of 2009. We took over that little fledgling church, and within a couple years, there were about 3 people, and then my family of 5. So it was a struggle. It was a real challenge. The language is very daunting. The context is quite difficult. But God's been very kind in the last 15 years, and to add to the church, to save many, and to build the church. So we're in the 80s and the 90s. We had talked to my daughter this morning, and there were 80 some people, 80 plus people this morning. Last Sunday we had 90, and there's just a real growing need. You know, it's a very difficult situation. These are all first generation believers. They didn't grow up in a church. They don't come from Christian families. Many of them had never heard the true gospel. I mean, none of them had heard the true gospel. Some of them had literally never heard of Jesus outside of the Catholic Church. And so we've been there laboring, and now we have a church filled with people that love Christ, that love one another. We meet in the mornings to pray at 9, and we worship from 10 to 11:30. And then we have lunch as a church every Sunday until 2, sometimes 3. But there's just a lot of work to do. You know, there's 168 hours in the week. I preach 1 hour a week, and then the 167 left, I live out what I preached. And so I preach on worship, and I need to live a life of worship. I preach on prayer, I need to live a life of prayer. I preach on marriage, and I need to show with my life to all these people what it means to be a godly husband and a faithful father. And it's a daunting task because we don't have a lot of laborers. We have, at this point, one lay elder. He's a godly man, but very limited in his time. And I have another young brother that just came over about a year ago. But within a couple years, he will most likely leave and go plant a church somewhere else in the country. And so we'll be very limited again. And just so you understand the context of, we've got people that are coming now that are driving an hour and a half. We have people coming from backgrounds where they come out of extremely charismatic churches. We have a young couple in our church that they were in a church. One of the elders was a so-called prophet, and God told him that he could have a second wife, a spiritual wife. And so he lives in open adultery before the church. The church accepts that. And this is the context we're in, and this is the church this is the context that we're seeking to establish a biblical church that lives out the one another's, that lives in holiness and godliness and Christ-likeness, and seeks to shine forth that light to a dark and dying nation. And I think that's where you come in. I mean, if you could help send the Millicans to us, it's not to us, it's to the nation there, it's to the people there. So I'm just standing as a Macedonian man, and I'm crying out, you know, come over and help us. Send the Millicans, whoever else you got there, send them over to you, and we'll take them. There's much work to be done. So I just want to commend you to that. Very thankful for your love for Christ, for your love for missions, for your desire to fulfill the Great Commission. And I pray that you guys can partner with the Millicans, and even through that, partner with the Climbing Bible Church. So thank you guys for your willingness to listen, and I'll be praying for you as well. Grace to all of you.
All right. Marcus apologizes for the wind in that video. He's over in Texas right now, visiting another brother named Jared Gilcher, and preaching for a missions conference for them. And then he'll be over at Shepherd's Conference as well. So Marcus is in the States right now. But dear brother, we've gotten to know him for probably, it's been about 12 years now that we've been in pursuit of going to the Czech Republic. And in the last 5 years or so, it's really ramped up. The opportunities increasing, the need remaining evident, and the invitation remaining as well. The Denny's are eager to have us there, and we're eager to be there. This morning, how much time do I have? When should I, if I want to allow some time for Q&A and everything?
So if you wanted about 15, we end at 9:45, so.
9:45, okay, great. I can do that. So this morning, my goal is to just hopefully, first of all, encourage you guys. As Marcus already said in that video there, we know that you guys love to support missions, and you're growing in that, and that's something you're already faithfully doing. So I hope to just encourage you further to keep doing that. And then I would love to just tell our story about how God has been faithful to bring us through the last 12 years or so to bring us to the point where we are now, to be leaving in about 2 months to go to the Czech Republic. The end of May is what we're shooting for. And then tell you what we're doing and why we're doing that. So I'll get going, and as I'm going, feel free to pipe in and ask questions. I'll make a more like reserved time for questions at the end, but feel free to just interrupt, and if I see your hand, I'll try to answer your question. I'm not an expert in the area yet, but give me a couple years, and if I could come back and talk again, I'm sure I'll have more to share. But yeah, I'll get going. But yeah, again, feel free to pipe in and ask any questions as we go. We're leaving May 2024. What's at the beginning, bottom of that screen there. But first question: where is the Czech Republic? Does anybody know? Yeah, a few of you know. Has anyone been there? I was told that a few people have been there. Okay.
People in the church have been to Slovakia.
Okay, right next door. Yeah, that's very close. Okay. Yeah, I'll give you an idea here. Hopefully you can all see the screen okay. So that's the Czech Republic with that orange circle there in the middle, surrounded by Germany, Poland, Slovakia, Ukraine, Romania. And if any of you ever decide that you want to visit for any reason, I've planned your itinerary right there. So go ahead and just follow that line and you'll make it safely. And we'll meet you in Prague. But that's where the Czech Republic is. It kind of shows from California to the middle of a part of Europe there. A tiny, tiny, tiny country. And I'll give you some more details on that here. I like to just kind of give a feeling for what the country looks and feels like a little bit. There's only so much I can do from here, but just by way of comparison, I'll give you some numbers here. Here's some helpful statistics. The population of the Czech Republic is only about 11 million. This was back in 2021 that these numbers were taken, so it could be more now. Square miles of the Czech Republic, 30,451. So compare that to California, which you are all familiar with. Population of 39 million. Here in just the state of California, square mileage of 164,000. So there's a little overlaid picture here to show you. Here's Czech Republic in the middle there. Here's California going across Hungary, Slovakia, Czech Republic, Berlin, Germany. So tiny, tiny, tiny country. And that's just to give you a sense of what this country is like a little bit. And we'll get into the history in a little bit here too. You'll see that it's a much older country than ours as well, with a much deeper history. But it is 82% smaller than your state. So a little tiny place that we're going to. Here's some other helpful statistics, and this is more to give you kind of the spiritual temperature of the Czech Republic there, the spiritual demographic or spiritual geography, however you want to phrase that. Even just that first number up top there, is a pretty shocking number. 37% of Czechs don't believe in any sort of spirit, higher being, God, however you want to put that. Just don't believe it's even a thing. And I'm telling you these details here to hopefully kind of paint a picture of why we're going as well, and what the need is. Again, these numbers are as of 2021, so maybe some things have changed, but I don't imagine if they have changed that it's been very much. 47% of people who took this poll in the Czech Republic don't associate themselves with any religion. So that would be about half of this room if you were in the Czech Republic. Wouldn't even associate with a religion personally. 9.3 of Czechs associate with Catholicism, and even as we talk about Catholicism or evangelicalism or Protestantism, whatever you want to put it, it's about the flimsiest version of any of those things that you've probably heard of here stateside as well. So even Catholicism, very little of what remains of Catholicism in the Czech Republic is Orthodox Catholicism. There's some there still, but it's a pretty modernized Catholicism. And then you have the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. 2.4% associate with the Abrahamic religions. And then 0.5%, and how I write it out there is actually inaccurate. I need to change that. It's not 0.5% of this number. It's 0.5% of the whole. But 0.5% of the whole associates specifically with evangelical Christianity. So not even a full percentage. It is the second most self-proclaimed atheistic country in the world, next to France. And so that kind of explains what's going on there a little bit too. 9.6, spiritual without religion. You've met those kinds of people. I just believe in spirituality in general. No definitions, no foundation of scripture or anything like that. Just spirituality without religion. Other religions, I'm not 100% sure how how wide the spectrum is of what religions would apply to that category, but maybe one of them is the gypsy subculture that's pretty prominent in the Czech Republic. There's a lot of gypsies, and whether you call that a religion or not, it's definitely a culture with its own morals and values and way of living for sure. So that could be part of that. Then 30.1% either just didn't answer the question or didn't care to give that information. So maybe that tells you something too. So as I've talked to the missionaries there, specifically Marcus, and then there's a couple others that we've come in contact with throughout the years, and then the locals as well, the natives, they all toss out around the same number as we talk about. How many churches do you feel like there are in the Czech Republic that you would recommend someone going to, that you would want them to go visit and be a part of? And all of them say we could probably hardly count on one hand how many churches like that there are in the Czech Republic. So you guys have a lovely, thriving, healthy, Bible-saturated church. Maybe 5 or 6 of those in the entirety of the country. I'm sure I know there's several churches just in your immediate circle, probably within 20 or 30 miles, that you would recommend people go to. Not the case in the Czech Republic. And when I talk about a healthy Bible teaching church, think a church that upholds the authority of Scripture, the inerrancy of Scripture, the sufficiency of Scripture, and teaches a pure gospel. 5 or 6 of those that we're aware of in the Czech Republic. And you know how it works. Like this is kind of a guess, but it's also a pretty well-informed guess. Like you guys already know within the circle of the type of church that you guys are, you probably know of people in like Nebraska that are a same kind of church, just because word gets around and we have our own kind of tight circles. Same thing in the Czech Republic. Word gets around of where these churches are, and they all hear about each other, and it doesn't take long for them to all hear about each other because there's only 5 or 6 of them. So that's the idea, and kind of a shocking number at the bottom there. That's one faithful church per 1.7 million people. That's why a big part of why we're going. So for the rest of the time, what I want you to know is how we got to where we are right now, my family and I, and then very brief history of the Czech Republic, and then why we're going. Yeah.
So when you say a church, large, small, 5 people?
Yeah, that's a very good clarifying question. Yeah. So as you heard Marcus say, their church is about, on average, probably 80 people. That's a big church.
And that was, they started, that's a year, 2, 3 years after it grew?
They've been there 15 years, and yeah, but when they got there, it was only about 12 people.
And how many languages?
In the church?
Well, in the country even, just pretty much one?
No. So Czech is the main language, but in their education system, students automatically learn the basics of Czech, English, French, and German. And so at some point in your education, you can choose to go down one of those routes a little bit more. And a lot of them actually do English. So anyone who's probably like 40 or younger knows some English. And within the church, there's probably 20 people that speak really good English. So at least we'll have a relationship with them right away. So that'll be helpful. But yeah, as far as the size of the church goes, I'm thinking of a brother who's in the city called Pilsen. And he was kicked out of a church that he went to go join because he started teaching the doctrines of grace. And they said, you can't talk about that here. And so he left and started a house church. And there's about 12 of them there as well. So it's anywhere from 12 to, I would say, the max on average of 75, 80, somewhere in there. Pretty small churches. Yeah, that's a good question. All right, we'll keep going. I'll tell you a little bit about our families very briefly. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold as well. A bit of our families, where we come from, really. This is just to show you our roots a little bit. So Corey's right there. You know him. Where is he? Oh, awesome. There he is. And then we have our other brothers. Maybe Corey's talked to you guys about them a bit. But Caleb is the oldest. He's in the black shirt next to Corey. Keegan is the next oldest, black shirt, top left middle kind of. Ethan's in the front in the plaid here. We have a good time together. We great friends, respect each other a lot. That being said, one of the biggest burdens for us leaving is our 3 unbelieving brothers, which are Caleb, Keegan, and Ethan. So Ethan in the blue here, Keegan, Caleb's not in that picture. He's right there. So do pray for them, please, as we go. we get lots of opportunities to speak of Christ to them and just love them by being their friends and loving on their kids and everything. But we would love to see them bend the knee to Christ as Lord. Awesome fathers, awesome husbands, but they do not want to acknowledge Christ as Lord at this time in their life. So please pray for them. Bob and Janice are our parents. I'll jump back here for a second in the front there with our last remaining grandparent. But Bob and Janice are wonderful, both loving discipleship in the church right now, and I couldn't ask for better parents. But just to show you some faces for where we come from. I just keep saying we because Corey's right there. Where we come from. This is Claire's side of the family. My wife is Claire right here in the front, and you'll see her walking around at some point this morning with, are all of our 3 kids there? 1, 2, where's the third? I have them. Yep. I'll show you more in a second. But that's Claire's side of the family. Michael and Vanessa are on the far left there in the pink shirt and the black dress. The baby that's in her tummy in that picture is no longer in her tummy. He was born, and he's awesome. They're in London. They're in smack dab middle of London, a part of a healthy church there as well, looking at doing church plants in the next 5 to 10 years, Lord willing. They just left about 2.5 years ago. David and Christiana are on the right there with their little boy Teddy, and they're at another church in Spokane that's a church plant of ours, and there's some more of us. Here's my family. You'll see Bennett and Millie running around, Caleb crawling around. Bennett's a goofball. We love him a ton. He's adopted from Florida. We got him at birth, and that's been an incredible joy in our life. And I forget that he's even adopted until I get to a presentation like this, and for some reason feel like that's necessary to say. It's probably not necessary to say. And then Millie Jo is on the bottom there. She's 3.5. Bennett's going to be 5 in May. Caleb is 9 months old. And then that's our family as a whole right there. So how we got here. Long story, but I'll try to be fairly concise with it. Both Claire and I were saved in junior high or high school. When I think about my salvation story and when God drew me to himself, I believe it was in 8th grade. And the reason I say that isn't because it was the first time I prayed a prayer. It's not because it was the first time I heard the gospel or even believed the gospel. But it was the first time that there was evident change in my life and a conscious decision to pursue Christ. That's when that happened in my life. I remember vividly watching students around me at school and juggling the options of, do I pursue what I've always been taught in my family and in my church, the gospel, living for Christ, or do I go after popularity in sports and girls and all the things that could be of the world. And remember God just being gracious to me in that moment, and in my conscience, by his Spirit, through the truth he had allowed me to be exposed to, just reminding me those things are vain, and they dissipate quickly. And there is one thing that lasts forever, and that's a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I knew I didn't want to spend my life on nothing. So I decided around my 8th grade year to pursue Christ and to live for him, and saw an evident change in my life at that time to want to speak to the lost and learn God's word. By sophomore year of high school, I began becoming interested in learning how to explain and teach God's word. So pursued a route to do that. So that's a brief version of my story. Claire is similar. She was saved, she thinks, in her freshman or sophomore year of high school. And the kicker for her was the realization of her tendency toward legalism. She was also raised in a Christian home, but it hadn't quite clicked with her in her early teen years, or until her early teen years, that you don't have to, you don't keep yourself saved. You don't continue to earn God's favor so that you stay saved. And she was never taught that. She was never taught that that's how salvation works, but just in her mind and in her heart, that's how she thought about it. And through a camp, a high school camp one time, the pastor was preaching, and it clicked with her at one point that, no, grace is all you need, and you are saved once and for all. And that's when she fell in love with Christ and realized how amazing he was and wanted to live for him. So that's just a brief version of our our testimonies. But in addition to that, Faith Bible Church has always spoken a lot about missions. We've always supported missionaries. And so that's just always been a part of the church conversation that we've been around. And so we commend you as well, and we'll just encourage you, like, keep that a part of your conversations, keep that a part of your what you're excited about, and the young people in this room will observe that and learn from that. And who knows, there could be missionaries in this room right now that you're not even aware of yet. I know for certain, well, I guess I don't know for certain, but I have a pretty good feeling that if my church hadn't been emphasizing missions, it might not have caught my attention. So we've always been exposed to missions, even like this, having missionaries come visit and whatnot. And then just faithfully discipled. Corey discipled me when I was in my early years of high school, especially junior high and high school. Spent a lot of time with him, and then other dear brothers in the church around his age, maybe a little bit older, that just took it seriously to invest in the next generation. And that's something our church is also very emphatic about. So it's all by God's grace that I've been exposed to that, and that He's kept me in that way and kept us in that way. And then not only regular exposure to missions, but regular exposure to missionaries is a huge part of our upbringing. So Claire has always had a close relationship with a lady in Tenerife named Natalie. Tenerife is part of Spain, it's in the Canary Islands, off the coast of Africa. And she kept a close relationship with her, visited Tenerife, I think 5 times at one point, spending a summer there. And then there's other missionaries or retired missionaries in our church that she befriended and was discipled by. Not necessarily because she was pursuing missions at that time, but just because she wanted that in her life. Similar for me, excuse me, I went to Russia twice when I was, I believe I was a freshman and a sophomore, those 2 summers. And then had a man who was a missionary in France disciple me for a time. Another brother who is a missionary in Indonesia discipled me for a time. Both of those brothers have passed now. And then another brother who is missionary in Spain discipled me, who still disciples me. Been in contact with Marcus for 12 years now, and that's been a part of my growth for sure. So all to say, missionaries have just been in our life. And again, I would just encourage you, if there's missionaries in your life that you have the chance to keep in touch with, get them in touch with your kids and get them communicating with your kids, get them to be pen pals or something like that. And there, again, that could produce a spark that hasn't yet been produced yet, potentially. I did go to seminary at the Master's Seminary, and then I've been in the pastorate for the last 5 years or so as a college pastor at our church in Spokane, Washington. So I consider that continued training and learning from the incredible elder team that I get to serve with, and grown a ton with them. Very thankful that we took the time to do that before going to the field, to be able to learn from those guys. And then all of this, just walking in faith and prayer. I can't say that there's been a clear, neon flashing light all these 12 years that has always said, yes, keep going. Yes, this is what you're called to. Yes, nothing's ever going to go wrong. Everything's going to work out perfectly. Keep going for it. In reality, this is a general idea that I know I'm interested in, and if God provides, I'm going to do it. And in the meantime, I'm going to be faithful with what He has in front of me, but toward the trajectory of being here one day if God wants me to be. Always open to the idea of going another direction if God would lead that way, but it has become very clear in the last 5 or 6 years, especially for Claire and I both, that we need to be going to the Czech Republic. Our way of thinking about that has been essentially, if it remains that the only reason we would stay in the United States is because of family and the church that we love, if that remains the only reason we would stay, then we need to go. And so, and I don't say only reason in I mean it in a numerical sense, not in a sense of value. Like, that's a very valuable thing, obviously, and we love our church and our family. But if that remains the one thing that we can count that would keep us from going, then we need to go. And God has kept that the case for 12 years. The only thing that we would stay for is church and family. Otherwise, the need remains, and the invitation remains, and God has continued to provide for that to happen. So all of that can be summed up by God's grace at the bottom there. So before I get into the history of the Czech Republic, can I answer any other questions or anything like that? Yeah.
I apologize if I was out in space, but
Yeah.
why exactly the Czech Republic? Did you say that?
Oh, I didn't. No, thank you for asking.
I mean,
Yeah.
how did it get from your idea to be a missionary to focusing on the Czech?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. I would normally talk about that. Yeah, when I'm 31 now. So when I was 19, Marcus came back on furlough for a couple months, and he was attending our elders meeting at Faith Bible Church. And at Faith Bible Church, they just open up elders meetings to whoever wants to come. So I was attending fairly regularly at that time, and especially heard that he was coming, so I wanted to be there and hear from him. And up to that point, I had taken interest in several other areas of the world. Like I said, I had been to Russia. Claire had been to Spain. I looked into Japan for a while. I looked into Africa for a while. But my brother Phil, brother in Christ Phil, who was a missionary for 30-something years, and 40 in Indonesia, doing Bible translation work. Something he challenged us to think about is, it's good that you're trying to figure out where, but probably even more importantly is who do you want to go work with? If you don't see yourself as a trailblazer, if you don't see yourself as someone to go start something new, you need to be thinking about finding someone who you would like to go work with. So when Marcus came to the elders meeting and just shared a lot of what I'm going to share with you about the brief history of the Czech Republic here, and the need that they have, that's what compelled me to just stay in contact with him. And that was 12 years ago. So we would email every couple months just to try to encourage each other. And then when seminary came, we were talking once a month on the phone or so, and that relationship just kept growing. So it was hearing of the need, seeing a person and a family that we believe we could work well with. We visited in 2017 for the first time, and then 2 more times since then. And that confirmed a lot of things as well, that we would like to be there working with that family in particular. And we asked them, how do you know when someone's a good fit to come serve with you? And they didn't really give an answer. They just said, we knew within about 5 hours of you guys being here. And I was like, great, that's a pretty clear green light to keep pursuing this. So that was a huge help along the way to kind of boost our confidence that, yep, keep going. They want you here. So we were 23 at the time. I don't know what they saw, but it was God's grace to continue drawing us that way. Okay, a few notes on the history here. And again, this helps to just kind of paint a picture of why the country is in large part what it is today. The demographic, the culture, the spiritual atmosphere, so to speak. The history definitely has a lot, if not everything, to do with that. And again, I'm not an expert in this. I actually know for a fact there's a period I wasn't aware of until about 2 weeks ago where Christianity spiked back up in their history and then fizzled out again. I have to look into that some more before I start trying to talk about it. But this is what I do know. Have me back in a couple of years and I'll give you more information. So present-day Czech Republic was first populated by the Celts in 4th century BC in the area called Bohemia. If you've heard of Bohemian things, that's the land that the Czech Republic began in. And if you know anything about the Celts, you know a little bit about the dark culture that exists in that history as well. Wars and a lot of gruesome stuff as well. So the Celts were the first to occupy the land in 4th century BC. And much of Czech's earliest history, because of Celtic influence and I guess just kind of the baggage they brought with them, is characterized by pantheistic and paganistic and atheistic morals. That's much of their earliest history. And so it wasn't until roughly 1,200 years later in 863 AD that the first missionaries showed up to the land. And even those missionaries were Catholic missionaries. So not hearing a pure gospel yet, but at least the first introduction of some form of Abrahamic religion, or however you want to categorize that. 863 AD is when the first missionaries showed up. So again, that's 1,200 years of the country's history before Jesus is spoken of, that I'm aware of. So very shortly after that, Catholicism became the major religious influence, and that was roughly around the 9th century, where Roman Catholicism entered the scene, and there was a reign of about 500 years. Ever since then, any influence of genuine Christianity has kind of just cropped up for a couple decades and fizzled back out. Talk about that more in a second here. I'll just talk about it now. John Huss is probably the most famous Christian missionary. Has anyone heard of John Huss, or Jan Hus the Goose, as he called himself? So this is a statue of him in downtown Prague. You can't tell from the picture, but that's about a 30-foot high statue and probably 50, 60 feet wide. It's a huge statue. That being said, despite what he taught and what he preached, he's just thought of as a political figure now, and someone who, stuck it to the man sort of thing, and represented things that some of the people liked because it meant that there was a little bit less oppressive government because of what he taught. But in reality, what he was doing was much of what you know of what Luther did during the Reformation, which was 100 years after this. This was in the 1400s. He opposed the Catholic Church, primarily opposing the imbalance that they were preaching of the authority of the church over the scriptures, authority of church and the papacy over Christ. You guys are probably familiar with that kind of thing. And so that's what he was preaching against. And then his ministry only lasted about 15 years. Phil, how long have you been the pastor here? 17. Okay, so about that long is how long John's ministry lasted. He was originally a professor, and then he saw what the Catholic Church was doing, dropped his professorship, made a living singing on the streets and singing in the cathedrals, and preached on Sundays. And he would fill a room of 3,000 people in Bethlehem Chapel is what the building is called. And he would preach, and he would oppose the Catholic Church in his preaching as well. He was martyred in 1415. July 6th is what they think. It could be somewhere right around there. Burned at the stake. Then within about 50 years, any Hussites, any disciples of his, any people he discipled or taught, within 50 years they were also either excommunicated or martyred as well. Didn't take long before that influence to fizzle out as well. We know God's word does not return void, and the church will be built. So we know that God is still working in that country, which is a big part of why we're going. But at that time, at least, it became dark pretty quickly again. A little bit more modern history. Some of you were alive during some of this. 1948, Czechoslovakia became a communist country. So think 500 years of an oppressive form of Catholic government over the country. A little bit of Christian spike for almost 20 years. I guess if you include the 50 years before the disciples were kicked out, his disciples, maybe, 65, 70 years. And then communism enters the country as well. So we all know enough about that to know that it's not helpful. It doesn't boost morale. We'll just say that. And so that wreaked havoc on the country for about 40 years until the Velvet Revolution took place. Again, some of you probably know more about that than I do, because you were born. I was born 3 years later. But the Velvet Revolution took place, and then in 1992, Czechoslovakia peacefully dissolved from into being the Czech Republic and Slovakia, so two different countries now. All of that to say, you can see why the country is how it is nowadays, especially in its spiritual temperature and its attitude toward the Bible and Christianity. Slow to trust, slow to receive new teaching, very immoral. One thing that speaks to that is just the fact that the generation living right now in the Czech Republic is the first, really, in a very real sense, the first free generation. In 1992 is when communism dissolved. And so I'm 31 years old. So anyone who was a teenager or older at that time is finally like, we can pursue the Czech dream now. American dream, Czech dream. We can pursue the Czech dream. And so very immoral culture because of that as well, pursuing worldliness, pursuing riches and all of that. Blind to the hopelessness that ultimately leads you to. And so not interested in spiritual things really for the most part because of that. So it is a very modern country. There's nothing. It's a completely developed country. You would go there and feel comfortable. You would be able to tell you're in Europe, but everything you have here is there. But yeah, did you have a question?
You keep saying Czech Republic. Is there not a Czechoslovakia anymore?
That's right. So that was in '89 there, or sorry, in '92, where Czechoslovakia dissolved into Czech Republic and Slovakia. So two different countries now. Yeah, yeah. Which is about the extent of my knowledge of that. But I want to learn more. We need to get some good books on that. Okay, I got to keep moving forward. So why are we going? This picture in a snapshot answers that question. These are the people that we want to go minister to. It's about 70% of the church probably. This was at a family camp I got to attend back in June of this year. And you can see there's a pretty wide range of age there as well. That wasn't the case back in 2017 when we first went there. There's probably mostly a church of 45 or older. I think there was 3 kids that were 5 and younger, and now it's a very wide range. So that's very exciting. Here's just kind of a taste of that. Here's some of the youth. These two are brother and sister. Their parents are part of a cult, and they don't want to have anything to do with it. So they come to the church, at least to the youth group. I don't believe they come on Sundays all the time, but they come to the youth group. Those two on the left. I like to just point out this picture because I know for a fact the church is doing as well as it is right now because it's a church built on prayer. Every week the church has 2 church services, and the first church service is entirely prayer. And probably 80% of the church shows up. And they pray for an hour together, and then they have a 30-minute break before the service starts, and then they preach and do music and all that, and then they hang out for another 2 or 3 hours afterward to do lunch. Part of that is because some people are driving from 2 hours away, and so they want to make it worth their time, you know. Others are, within 15, 20 minutes, but there's a few families, I think there's 4 or 5 families that drive anywhere from an hour to 2.5 hours away to come to this church. A few more pictures just to give you some faces to think about. This is Pavel. I'll talk about him more in a minute, but he's praying and singing Merry birthday, happy birthday to Claire. Something they do every first Sunday of the month is they acknowledge whoever's birthday it is that month, and if there's 8 birthdays, there's 8 cakes. If there's 2 birthdays, there's 2 cakes. And so every birthday person gets a cake to share with the church. Pretty fun. On the right there is a hike that we went to. We hiked to the highest peak of the Czech Republic, which is not impressive. It took about 3.5 hours. So it's nothing to write home about necessarily, but it's a beautiful sight at the top. I wish I had more pictures of that. But I'd like to camp on this slide for a minute because when you think of the future of the Czech Republic and the church that we're joining now, I want you to think of these faces. Because these are the men and women who right now are demonstrating interest in serious discipleship and interest in equipping. So I'll talk about them each for a little bit here. So this is Vratia and Bodanka. Vratia is the guy on the right. Bodanka is his wife. Bodanka is a lawyer. She's super sharp. They both have really good English as well. She's being trained for biblical counseling right now from Amy Denny, Marcus's wife. And Amy is confident that in the next year or so, she would be ready to start counseling others as well. First generation Christian also. Each of the people in this church, probably 80% of the people in this church are first generation Christians. Vratia, her husband, is just a servant. He's a deacon type guy, on his way to being a deacon type guy who just does all things tech, media, audio, behind the scenes stuff. He's doing it all. So they've demonstrated just a deep commitment and love for the church, and that's the kind of people you want to keep investing in for sure. Petr and Betty, Peter and Elizabeth. Petr is a military guy, and he's going to retire in 10 years, and he has he's demonstrated the ability to teach. He preached for his first time at that family camp I went to. I heard it through translation, but even what I heard through translation, it was clear, it was compelling, it was faithful to the text. and he wants to keep learning how to do it better. He initiates discipleship with the youth. He takes them on hiking outings and teaches them a Bible study on the way and at the top of a mountain. And so he's just demonstrating initiative in these kinds of things. He's going to retire in 10 years, he thinks, from the military. He's my age. And he's already said, I want to be trained for vocational ministry. So we're going to hold on to him. And his wife, Betty, is also super intelligent, both growing in their marriage and she wants to support him in that as well. They both speak awesome English.
Is it the Czech service?
Yeah.
Military?
That's right. Mirek down here, he's the oldest of each of these here. I think he's probably in his 60s. Preached also for his first time. You can't really see him. That's the best picture I have of him, but he's preaching up there. He preached for his first time at that family camp as well. Again, clear, compelling, loving, passionate, faithful to the text, and he'll probably be the kind of guy that would help lead Bible studies and whatnot as we start doing regional Bible studies. Pavel, down here on the right, he and his wife were saved. His wife's name is Yana. They were saved out of a cult about 7 years ago. Very similar to the one, similar nature to the one that Marcus described in that video of where the pastor just kind of made his own rules, made his own theology, demanded that you believe it and follow it, and they got saved out of that cult about 5 years ago. So each of these have expressed interest and ability, and so we're prayerful that in the next, who knows, 5 to 10 years they'll be a part of a church plant. The question for each of them is just how long before we would confidently say of them that they meet the qualifications of elders, especially in their family life and in their marriage. Again, these are first-generation Christians that haven't had godly examples to learn from their whole life. So figuring out their teachability, figuring out what they need to grow in, that kind of thing. But the interest and the ability are both there. Here's the Denny's. You saw Marcus on the screen. That's a much better angle of him. And his wife, Amy, we love them a ton. They're in their mid-40s, I believe. Sounds about right. And then their daughters, Lydia, Sophie, and Chloe. Sophie is their evangelist. She's a bulldog in her classroom in a very healthy way. But she actually led a friend to Christ a couple weeks ago in her church. Both these two on the end here, Chloe and Sophie, are in the Prague Conservatory for music, so they're just extremely hard workers, very talented musicians. They all serve the church really, really zealously, and we're very excited to come alongside each of them. So continuing on why we're going here. I mentioned earlier there's only 5 or 6 faithful Bible teaching churches in the country, and the church right now is ready for equipping in a way that it hasn't been in the history of this church. Again, there's the demographic that has changed a ton from children to seniors and everything in between. So there's multiple generations represented, and they need to start being discipled, and families and parents need to start being discipled for biblical parenting and marriages. For the first time ever in the last 4 years or so, people are expressing like a greater understanding of their need for discipleship, them personally, not just the idea of discipleship, but them personally in their life and in their families. There's biblical counseling. There's you know what I mean when I say this. There's too much biblical counseling. There's too much that needs to be done. And Marcus and Amy are the only ones able to do it right now. So they need people to come help them disciple. They need people to come help them love these families. They need people to come help them learn how to be evangelists in their families and be faithful husbands and fathers. And then also to train leaders for future church plants and whatnot. So 2 Timothy 2:2 and Titus 2 are the passages you should think of when you think of why we're going. My role will be to help Marcus train up men who are going to be able to handle the word faithfully and accurately and teach that to others. So that's why I want to go. I want to help teach some classes. I'm going to preach probably every other month or so through translation while we're learning the language. And then as far as our family goes, we're young, we're not perfect. I'm not a perfect husband. We're not perfect marriage. We're not perfect parents. And the majority of people that we'll be helping disciple are either our age or older. But all that being said, by God's grace, He has provided us something that these people have not had the blessing of experiencing yet, which is 30 years of observing godly families all around us. And so we have that to offer. And we have God's word to do that with, of course. So to train up, to have Claire help train up the younger women, and for me to help train up younger men as well, for godliness and godly living. That's why we want to go. And the Denny's are up to their gills, so to speak, in all of that. So they need some help. Right now, here's where the church is in Kladno. I'm wrapping up here. Church in Kladno right here. Here's the center of the country, Prague. The idea is that probably in the next 5 to 7 years, there'll be a church plant somewhere around here. And we'll keep moving east. That's Prague there. So we're thinking maybe 2030, maybe a little bit sooner. We would plant a church there. And then I'm just estimating and projecting down the road. We'll see if this is what happens. But I just circled Kolin, this little city here. I don't know if that's where it'll be, but we're trying to move east. But in 2035 or later, that's where the next church plant would be. We want to spread across the country and get faithful churches. It could be 2 in my lifetime, and I'd be okay with that. We're trusting the Lord for the timing of all that. So here's some prayer. Just pray that God would keep us unified and thriving, excuse me, in our marriage. Keep us joyfully pursuing Him, helping each other do that, shepherding our children well, showing them Christ, raising one-time costs. Both one-time costs and our monthly ongoing needs are at about 85% right now. So by May, we'd love to see God put us at 100%. So please be praying for that. Pray if God would enable you to help with that as well. We'd be humbly grateful for that. And then Czech men to be called to leadership. That's the next thing, is to start focusing on training people for future church plants. We don't only want godly pastors and elders. We want godly fathers and husbands leading families in those church plants. So that's the next step for the church. Praises. Things have gone smoothly up to this point, stepping out of my ministry position and Spokane. The support has come in quickly, and people have been generous and glad to help. And then I love just saying that the church is excited to have us, because that's a big question mark when you're going to a different country, speaking a different language. Like, do they even want us here? And they have very clearly expressed, please come, we need your help. We're eager to have you. Thank you for doing what you're wanting to do. So that's really humbling and really exciting for us to know that they are ready to receive us. So we're grateful for that. Last thing, if you want to just subscribe to our blog, this is where you can go. Can you all read that? It's just millicansandczech.org. Every month or so, I'll write an update. So I'd hope to encourage you guys to just keep me up to speed on what God's doing over there. And that's all I got for you. But I think we have 0 time for questions, do we?
A few minutes.
Okay. What can I answer for you? Or, yeah.
So is it mountainous? Are there, highways like we have? And what is their industry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not very mountainous, but it's very hilly. Lots of hills. It's pretty agriculture heavy.
It's passable.
Yeah, it's passable. Yeah, there's highways and freeways. Actually, the majority of your driving is on highways and freeways, because the way the country is kind of set up as far as the places we've been is like every 15 minutes or so, there's another village of 20 to 50,000 people. And then you drive another 10 to 15 minutes, there's another village of 20 to 50,000 people. And so there's a lot of highway travel to get to those places.
And what is their industry?
That's a good question. They are pretty heavy on agriculture and farming. Hops is a big one as far as agriculture goes. They have a Lego factory in Kladno. But yeah, I don't know a lot about that, to be honest. But I know those are at least fairly common things. Yeah.
I'm trying to picture this Czechoslovakia being divided. What about Slovakia? Are they interested in that? What are they doing about that part?
As far as missions?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I haven't spent time looking into that.
How did they get divided? How did they decide we're going to do this and we're going to do something different?
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I need to look into still, is more of the details of their history. So I apologize, I'm not sure. Yeah.
I think it kind of broke into kind of like ethnic territories. I think they
Okay.
both two different ethnic groups, and they
Okay.
just broke off into their own country and made it their own country.
Yeah.
I believe.
My grandpa's Czech.
Your grandpa's Czech.
He's from Czechoslovakia, or was.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a comment, when we were over there, I remember we had a professor talk with us and spend a while going on over some of the history and that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things he did say, because it had been so recent that they had had communism
Oh, yeah.
there, that and we were over there probably 5 years ago.
Okay.
He said, when you walk down the street, you'll notice a lot of people won't give eye contact.
Yeah. Mhm.
He said they tend to look down because they're still part of that culture where they wanted to be under the radar
Mhm.
with the communism.
Mhm.
And so, like you said, that the people are slow to change and hesitant because of, like you said, their history.
Yeah.
So it's a real hurdle to get over, to establish that trust, to be able to have a relationship with them.
Yeah.
But one thing we did notice is, because we went into the Czech homes and stuff,
Mhm.
the people were very friendly,
Yeah.
one-on-one. They're lovely people.
Yeah, one-on-one. Yeah, definitely. Once you get
But
into a little bit
in
of
the
a comfort
cities,
zone.
They're kind of looking down. You don't
Yeah.
give them eye contact.
Jared, talk a little bit about language acquisition and, some places you can go and you're just fine not learning the native language, but what are you guys doing in that regard?
Yeah, it's a very difficult language. Right now, we're just doing once-a-week lessons via Zoom with Amy, who's certified to teach entry-level Czech. They've been doing language training for the entire 15 years that they've been there, and they say expect 5 to 7 years before you can speak respectably. And
But he's preaching in Czech now.
but he's preaching in Czech. He said by about year 8, he was preaching in Czech. He was reading from his manuscript because he had to. But yeah, so when we get there, we'll both do 2 lessons a week with a professional tutor, one-on-one. And the majority of our time will be focused on language learning for probably the first 2 years, and then we'll start branching out a little bit more after that. But we need to go really hard on the language for the first couple of years. Yeah,
It's taxing.
yeah, it's very difficult.
No, it's a big request, it's just for the sake of really connecting with people in a culture. When you're learning their language, they know that they're loved and cared for by you, and that's a huge sacrifice.
Yeah, you immediately gain their respect when they know you're American and they hear their language coming out of your mouth, and that impresses them a lot. Very, very proud of their education and of their language as well. Yeah. Cool. Thank you guys. Appreciate you being here. Thank you.